"Is this bring your grandma to work day?" a young cadet sneered, his voice echoing in the vast marble corridor. He and his two friends cornered the old woman, her silver hair tied back as she methodically pushed a wide broom. She ignored them, the rhythmic swoosh of her work a steady, defiant beat. Infuriated by her silence, the lead cadet, Preston, stepped directly in her path, kicking the small pile of dust she'd gathered, scattering it across the gleaming floor. But he had no idea who he was messing with. Before I tell you exactly what happened next, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now let's get into it. The air in the United States Capitol building was thick with unspoken power, a place where history was etched into the very walls. Eleanor Vance, 65 years old, moved with a quiet economy that belied her age. Her silver hair was pulled into a tight, no-nonsense bun, and the lines on her face told stories of long days and longer nights, though not the kind anyone in this hallway could ever imagine. Her gray work uniform was spotless. Her hands, though wrinkled, were steady on the long wooden handle of her push broom. She was a fixture in these halls, a silent, unassuming presence, as constant as the statues of statesmen that watched from their pedestals. To most, she was invisible, a part of the building's maintenance machinery. But today, she became a target. The three West Point cadets, their dress gray uniforms so crisp they seemed to crackle with arrogance, had decided she was their entertainment. Their leader, a young man named Preston with a sharp jaw and dull eyes, saw her not as a person, but as an obstacle, a relic. His friends flanked him, snickering into their hands, their laughter sharp and cruel in the reverent silence of the corridor. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Preston pressed, stepping closer. "Are you deaf, old lady?" Eleanor stopped her sweeping. She slowly raised her head, her gaze meeting his. Her eyes, a pale, clear blue, were calm and unervingly direct. There was no fear in them, no anger, only a quiet assessment. She had seen boys like this before, boys drowning in the false confidence of a new uniform, boys who thought shouting made them strong. She'd seen them in places where the stakes were infinitely higher than a little dust on a marble floor. "I'm just doing my job, son," she said, her voice a low, steady rumble, trying to keep the place clean. The simplicity of her response, the utter lack of deference, seemed to fuel Preston's rage. It was a dismissal. He had expected her to cower, to apologize. Her calm was a mirror, and he didn't like the reflection. "Your job," he scoffed, "is to be invisible, to get out of the way when your betters are walking through." A few staffers, their arms full of legislative briefs, hurried past. They saw the confrontation, the trio of imposing cadets looming over the small, elderly woman. They felt a prick of conscience, a flicker of indignation, but the current of their own urgent lives pulled them forward. Intervening was a risk, a potential complication in a city that ran on smooth transactions and avoiding trouble. So they lowered their eyes and quickened their pace, leaving Eleanor isolated in a bubble of youthful contempt. "Look at this," the second cadet chimed in, pointing at the collar of Eleanor's work shirt. "Probably never did a single thing for her country. Just shuffled a broom her whole life." Eleanor's gaze remained locked on Preston. It was a technique learned long ago. Focus on the primary threat. Ignore the noise. The noise can't hurt you, but the threat can. "Don't you boys have a class to get to?" she asked, her tone even. The more she refused to give them the reaction they craved, the more their frustration mounted. It was like trying to punch smoke. Preston's face reddened. He was used to commanding respect, or at least the appearance of it. This old woman, this nobody, was defying the authority his uniform was supposed to grant him. He stepped closer, invading her personal space until he could smell the faint scent of lemon polish on her clothes. "We'll leave when we're done with you," he hissed, his voice dropping. "Maybe you need a lesson in respect." The air crackled with a tension that only Eleanor seemed fully equipped to handle. The boys were escalating, their words turning into veiled threats. They were children throwing a tantrum, but they were children in the bodies of men, and that made them dangerous. Eleanor simply held her ground, her silence a shield, her calm a weapon they had no defense against. The scene was a slow-motion injustice, unfolding one cruel word at a time on the cold, indifferent marble. Preston, feeling he was on the verge of breaking the old woman's composure, decided it was time to end the game. He leaned in, his voice a conspiratorial whisper laced with menace. You know, insubordination is a serious offense, even for a civilian. We could have you fired. He paused for effect. Or better yet, we could recommend you for a psychological evaluation. An old woman, acting confused, being belligerent towards cadets. Who do you think they're going to believe? The other two cadets shifted uncomfortably. This had gone too far. The threat was vile, a final, cruel overreach designed not just to humiliate, but to destroy her livelihood and her dignity. It hung in the air, thick and poisonous. As he spoke, Preston gestured mockingly at a small, faded pin on Eleanor's collar. It was a simple metallic insignia, its details worn smooth by time, almost invisible against the gray fabric. What's that? Your perfect attendance award. The boy's laugh was sharp, but Eleanor didn't hear it. The sight of his finger jabbing toward the pin was a trigger. The polished marble floor beneath her feet dissolved into swirling desert sand. The harsh fluorescent lights of the hallway became the blistering, unforgiving sun of Kuwait. The cadet's voice faded, replaced by the deep, rhythmic whump 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 of a Chinook helicopter's blades and the high-pitched whine of an M1 Abrams tank's turbine engine. For a split second, she saw another hand, young and strong, its knuckles caked with sand, pressing an identical pin into her fatigues. She saw the face of a young corporal, barely 20 years old, grinning at her before they moved out. "For luck, Sergeant Major," he'd said, his voice nearly lost in the engine's roar. The memory was a ghost, a fleeting echo, but it solidified something within her. The broom in her hands felt less like a tool and more like the stock of her rifle. From a side corridor, hidden from the cadet's view, a young legislative aide named Leo had stopped. He was on his way to deliver a stack of documents when the raised, arrogant voices caught his ear. He saw the three cadets looming over the old cleaner. He recognized her instantly. It was Eleanor, the woman who always had a quiet good morning for everyone, a fixture of the building as solid as its marble columns. His first instinct was to walk away, just like the others. He was an intern, the lowest rung on a very tall ladder. Confronting West Point cadets was a career-ending move. But then he saw Preston kick the dust pile. It was such a small, petty act of cruelty, but it shattered Leo's hesitation. His own grandfather had served in Vietnam, a quiet man who, like Eleanor, carried his stories deep inside him. Seeing her, he saw his grandfather, and a hot, protective anger rose in his chest. He backed away slowly, his heart pounding. He wouldn't confront them directly. That would be foolish. But he wouldn't walk away. He ducked into a small alcove, his fingers trembling as he pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts, past senators and chiefs of staff, looking for one specific extension. It was a long shot. The man he was trying to reach was one of the most powerful figures in the Pentagon. He found the number for the executive assistant of Colonel Sterling. Taking a deep breath, he pressed call. Colonel Sterling's office, a crisp voice answered. "My name is Leo," he whispered, his voice cracking. "It's an emergency." There was a skeptical pause. "The colonel is in a meeting." "No, you don't understand," Leo insisted, his voice gaining strength. "There are some cadets harassing one of the janitors down in the main hall. A woman named Eleanor Vance." He said the name, and the entire atmosphere of the call shifted. There was another pause, but this one was different, sharp, attentive. "What was the name again?" "Eleanor Vance," Leo repeated. "They're being awful to her. Please, I think the colonel would want to know." The line went quiet. Leo could hear muffled, urgent words in the background. Then the crisp voice was back, all skepticism gone, replaced by a steely efficiency. "The colonel is on his way." Colonel Sterling sat at his sprawling mahogany desk, the seal of the United States Army embedded in the wood, staring at a satellite map of a volatile border region. His brow was furrowed in concentration when his aide buzzed in. He waved him off without looking up. "Not now, Lieutenant." "Sir, The aide's voice cut through his focus, laced with an uncharacteristic urgency. "It's about a woman, a Ms. Eleanor Vance." The name hung in the air. Colonel Sterling went completely still. His head snapped up, the satellite map forgotten. His eyes, which a moment ago were scrutinizing troop movements halfway across the world, were now laser-focused on his aide. "What about her?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "There's a situation in the Capitol main hall, sir. An aide from a senator's office just called. Some West Point cadets are harassing her." Sterling was out of his chair before the lieutenant finished the sentence. The transformation was breathtaking. The contemplative strategist vanished, replaced by a field commander. He grabbed his uniform jacket from the back of his chair, his movements economical and precise. "Give me General Casey's office on the line. Now," he commanded as he strode towards the door. "Tell him I have a code Eagle, and get a security detail to the main hall. No sirens. Just move." "A code Eagle, sir," the lieutenant stammered, scrambling to keep up. It was a designation reserved for incidents involving the nation's most revered living heroes, a protocol that hadn't been activated in over a decade. "You heard me, Lieutenant," Sterling said, not breaking stride. "Move." The aide fumbled for his phone, his mind racing. Eleanor Vance. He had heard the name whispered in the halls of the Pentagon, a legendary figure from a war his generation only knew from history books. He thought it was just a story. Downstairs, the atmosphere shifted before anyone saw a thing. It began with a sound, the rhythmic, authoritative click of hard-soled dress shoes on marble, approaching at a pace that was not hurried, but was utterly unstoppable. The cadets' laughter died. They turned. Striding down the center of the hall was a full colonel, his uniform immaculate, his chest a constellation of ribbons and medals. He was flanked by 2 members of a security detail, but they were almost an afterthought. The colonel's presence alone was an overwhelming force. The cadets, who had been posturing just seconds before, instinctively snapped to a rigid, if clumsy, state of attention. The balance of power in the hallway had just been inverted. Colonel Sterling didn't even glance at the cadets. His eyes were fixed on the old woman with the broom. He came to a halt a few feet away, his boots clicking sharply on the floor. The entire hallway held its breath. Leo watched from the alcove, his hand over his mouth. Then, in a voice that was not a shout but carried the force of a cannon blast, a voice honed by years of command in the field, he barked a single, archaic word. "Airborne." The word echoed off the marble walls. The cadets stared in blank confusion. It was a term from history books, a relic of a different army. It meant nothing to them, but it meant everything to Eleanor Vance. The effect was instantaneous. The stooped, tired old woman was gone. In her place stood a soldier. Her back straightened with an audible snap. Her shoulders squared. Her chin came up. The years seemed to fall away from her, her eyes burning with a fire that had been banked for decades. She dropped the broom. It clattered to the floor, forgotten. Her body locked into a perfect, textbook position of attention. And from her lips, in a voice that was rough from disuse but utterly firm, came the reply, roared with a lifetime of conviction. All the way. Colonel Sterling's hand snapped up in a salute so sharp it could have cut glass. He held it, his gaze locked on Eleanor, a silent testament of respect passing between 2 warriors. Finally, he lowered his hand and turned his icy gaze upon the 3 boys. "Do you have any idea who you were talking to?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. They were speechless. "You are standing in the presence of Sergeant Major Eleanor Vance," the colonel announced, his voice rising to fill the hall. "This woman is a recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross. She has 3 silver stars for gallantry, 4 bronze stars for valor, and 5 purple hearts." With each medal he named, a collective gasp went through the growing crowd of onlookers. "This woman," the colonel continued, his voice shaking with controlled fury, "held the line for 72 hours alone against an entire enemy battalion during Desert Storm after her command staff was taken out. She is not a janitor. She's a living legend. And you worthless, arrogant children had the unmitigated gall to disrespect her." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of Preston's jaw metaphorically hitting the floor. Colonel Sterling took a deliberate step toward the cadets, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Your names," he commanded. They stammered them out, their voices barely audible. "You will report to my office at 0600 tomorrow morning in full dress uniform," he said. "You will spend the next 6 months studying every after-action report from Sergeant Major Vance's unit in the Gulf War. You will write a 100-page paper on the meaning of honor, courage, and respect. And you will be fortunate if, at the end of that, I don't have you drummed out of the service entirely. You are a disgrace to the uniform you wear." He turned his back on them, a gesture of ultimate dismissal. He then faced Eleanor, his expression softening entirely. "Sergeant Major," he said, his voice now filled with warmth and reverence. "It is an honor, sir." Eleanor, who had remained at perfect attention, finally relaxed. A small, weary smile touched her lips. She looked at the 3 terrified boys, and for the first time, a hint of pity entered her eyes. "They're just kids, Colonel," she said softly. "Full of fire. Just need to be aimed in the right direction, is all." She bent down, her movements slow and deliberate, and picked up her broom. "A person's worth isn't in the medals they wear or the rank on their collar," she said, her voice just loud enough for the cadets and the crowd to hear. "It's in the job they do, and doing it right, no matter what it is." She looked at the broom in her hands. "This is my job now, and I aim to do it right." The simple wisdom of her words, delivered without an ounce of anger, was a far more powerful lesson than the Colonel's fury. It was a lesson in grace from a woman who had seen the very worst of humanity and had chosen, in the end, to be kind. As she held the worn wooden handle, another image flickered behind her eyes. It was the same insignia pin, new and gleaming, being pressed into her hand. Not by a fellow soldier, but by a Kuwaiti village elder, a man whose family her unit had protected from an enemy patrol. For the soldier with the quiet eyes and the strong heart, the old man had said through a translator. That pin wasn't a military award. It was a reminder of who she fought for, the innocent people caught in the crossfire. It was a symbol not of valor in battle, but of the quiet duty to protect those who could not protect themselves. A duty she was in her own small way, still performing every single day. The fallout was swift. The 3 cadets endured the most grueling 6 months of their lives under Colonel Sterling's direct tutelage. The arrogance was sandblasted away, replaced by a profound, humbling understanding of the legacy they had sworn to uphold. The incident prompted a formal review at West Point, leading to the creation of a new mandatory course, The Legacy of Valor, a program focused on the stories of enlisted heroes, with the first chapter dedicated to Sergeant Major Eleanor Vance. About a year later, a young, newly commissioned second lieutenant was walking through that same Capitol hallway. He saw the old cleaner sweeping the floor. He stopped. His posture was straight, his eyes clear. It was Preston. He waited until Eleanor looked up. He didn't speak. He simply rendered a slow, perfect salute, a gesture of profound and earned respect. Eleanor Vance stopped her sweeping. She looked at the young officer for a long moment, then gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. The lesson had been learned. The fire had been aimed in the right direction. Eleanor's story teaches us that true honor isn't found in the medals on a chest or the rank on a collar. It lives in the quiet dedication to the task at hand, in the dignity of a job well done, and in the grace shown to those who may not deserve it. True heroism is often invisible, walking silently among us every single day. Have you ever misjudged someone based on their job or their appearance? What would you have done if you were Leo, watching that confrontation unfold from the alcove? Do you believe that true strength often lies not in aggression, but in quiet, unshakable composure? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story reminded you that heroes come in all forms, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the quiet warriors among us. Share this with someone who needs to see the power of humility and respect. We read every single comment and value your perspective. More stories about underestimated legends and hidden heroes are waiting for you on screen. Watch those next and we'll see you tomorrow with another story that will change the way you see the world.